Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brazee. It is Monday, November 10th around here. We've been gone for a little bit of time. Apologies for last week, was not feeling myself, but we are officially back. We are back to business, and we got a lot to get to. We have some big games to talk about. Indiana survives at Penn State, Oregon survives at Iowa, and a couple other big-time games where teams pretty much handle business the rest of the way. Then we got some upsets. We got some big-time upsets from this past weekend. Vast majority of them in the ACC. Wake Forest, Louisville, Duke all go down. Doesn't change much about Duke's CFP hopes, but adds a fun wrinkle into what this could look like down the road. Wisconsin gets a big-time win over Washington right after they invested in Luke Fickell, and then Tulane knocks off Memphis and probably knocks Memphis out of that CFP race in the group of five. But then we'll do a little bit of a whip around. Georgia absolutely rolls. Notre Dame as well. Vanderbilt survives in overtime, and Auburn's problems are still problems. There's no doubt about that. And then we'll get into a little bit of an update around the group of six because there's quite a bit of movement this past weekend. A lot of different teams that are firmly in the mix. But let's talk about the big games first. Let's start with the three ranked matchups. Before we get to those ranked matchups, though, we got to talk about this one. Indiana survives 27-24 on the road at Penn State. It was a wild one. There's no doubt about that. I'll be totally honest. I had a couple of different games going on. This was a side TV. I'll be totally honest. I had Texas Tech BYU, obviously the main event, and then you had a couple other ones going on. This was one I didn't think I was going to have to worry about. I'll be totally honest. I thought Penn State was going to fight. I thought they were going to play well. I thought in the second half Indiana was going to be able to pull away. And then all of a sudden, Penn State gets a pick and they take the lead and everything changes in a second. Then, when they're forced into a tough spot, when Fernando Mendoza has been forced into a tough spot twice this year, against Oregon when he throws that pick six, and against Penn State when he throws the pick, they come down and they score, he's just been nails. He's been absolutely incredible. In the last drive of the game, he was 7 for 9 for 87 yards and a touchdown. A couple of incredible plays. Obviously, Omar Cooper in the end zone. Charlie Becker earlier on that drive, who coming into the game had 7 catches on the year, had 7 on Saturday. No Elijah Surratt was a massive, massive thing for this football team and something we might want to watch going forward. If teams, even if Elijah Surratt is on the field, if teams can take that player just a little bit out of the equation, we've seen the Indiana offense get a little bit stuck in the mud. That's something to watch as we move forward. Obviously something that they struggled with in this football game. Doesn't change that you got the win. And just a little bit more on that Omar Cooper catch. That is one of the best body control plays I've ever seen in my entire life. I think it's right up there with the Brock Bowers play in the Peach Bowl, right up there with a number of just incredible, incredible plays. This one's ridiculous. It looks like his left foot is coming down. He seemingly picks it up just a little bit and lets the right foot get down because that's the one in bounds. Just ridiculous. Incredible, incredible play by a guy that probably is one of the more underappreciated players in the entire country. And you had the call. Everyone's got a take on the Gus Johnson call. I loved it. I don't know if it was a Heisman moment, the way that he said, but at the end of the day, it was a huge moment for this Indiana football team. Hopefully Elijah Surratt can come back healthy. If he doesn't, this is an offense that can get stuck in the mud, and that is something to watch moving forward. Usually when you have Surratt out there, you can't really stack against the run the way that Penn State was able to in this game, and they were able to slow him down. And huge props to Penn State. They did a great job. Terry Smith got these guys ready to roll in. I think this is something that a lot of people will do. People will try to bury Indiana for this. They'll say they're not as good as we once thought, and there's some worries. There's no doubt about that. There are things I'm looking at going forward. There's this thing that happens in the sport quite a bit, and it's really something that hasn't happened quite as much in the Big Ten for a number of reasons. I heard Brooks Austin talking about this yesterday on his show. He was talking about the idea that Penn State's still a uniquely talented team, and they're not usually in those spots. They're not usually the team that's punching up from a 3-6 or 3-5 record. They're usually the team that is 9-1, and you know you're going to get a fight against them because they're a really good football team. It's very rare, at least in the Big Ten the last couple of years, that the elite talented teams in those conferences are playing the way that Penn State played this year. It's the same thing when people talk about Texas losing to Florida earlier in the year. Not a great loss. I'm not here to tell you that that was a great loss by Texas. Just to say, Florida does have the prerequisite talent to hang with Texas, to hang with just about anyone in the country. So that one doesn't absolutely, it's not a dagger the way that I think some people think it would. Michigan losing to Oklahoma, That's obviously a game, and Oklahoma's just a good, downright good team. But at the end of the day, I think we get lost in this a little bit. We get lost in your record is who you are, and obviously, Penn State has not been a good team this year. I'm not trying to argue they have been. I'm just trying to argue the talented teams have the capability of beating anyone in the country. Penn State, any given Saturday, can beat anyone. That's just the reality. Now, will they, especially without Drew Aller? Probably not. They're probably going to end the season well below 500, and they're going to be looking forward to 2026, which a lot of them already are. But I do think we get lost in that a little bit because Penn State has been terrible this year. They're also a uniquely talented team that's loaded with NFL players. So this was going to happen to someone. It might have not been Indiana, but this time around it was Indiana. You got to be able to handle your business in those moments. I think it's just one of those things where Indiana was very, very unlikely to roll through this season without any problems. They had the problem at Iowa. They have the problem here. You gotten out with wins in both spots. It would have been very easy to lose both those games. You found a way to win both of them. Now you move forward. I think they get a bye week this week, and then they get Wisconsin and Purdue to finish. They should be an undefeated team walking into Indianapolis. The way that we thought they would be going into this game got a little bit sketchy there for a second, but Indiana makes the plays when they absolutely need to, and that's what championship teams do. Speaking of the other team that gave Indiana a run for their money earlier in the year, Oregon escapes Iowa 18-16. This was perfect. I'll be totally honest with you. This is the absolute perfect college football game. It was gross. It was cold. It was tough. It wasn't bad football, I think, is the biggest thing here. There were bad moments, including the snaps over the head, the punter for Iowa just having to do all types of work that he probably didn't think he was going to have to do. But at the end of the day, this was an awesome game. It was two really, really talented, really tough teams that are going after each other for 4 quarters. They didn't really have the option to air the ball out. And it just came down to who was the more physical football team, and usually Iowa wins those football games. Oregon came in and played Iowa football better than Iowa did, because the reality is, if I told you Oregon's stat line in this game, you would think it would be Iowa's. They had less passing yards than Iowa did. Never thought I would say that. They had 261 on the ground compared to 101 for Iowa. I definitely would have thought those were flipped if you had told me that on Friday. It's crazy. And frankly, if you could have gotten odds that Mark Gronowski was going to throw for more yards than Dante Moore on Saturday, you got really, really good odds. I can promise you that. But just a crazy, crazy outcome in a game that I thought Oregon was going to win this game. I thought they were going to win it close. So in terms of the outright score, not all that surprising. The way that Oregon went about this is really, really cool in a lot of different ways, because there's a number of times that Oregon has been, earlier this year against Indiana, they got physically beaten. In this game, they knew it was going to be physical. They knew there was no other way for them to go about business than being the more physical, better rushing, better attack the rest of the entire game. And they played Iowa football. They dared Iowa to play the game that Iowa loves to play. They're more than comfortable in, and Kirk Ferentz has won a lot of really tough games against some teams that are outright better than this Oregon team is, and Oregon found a way to get it done. That is what's different about this Oregon team compared to last year, compared to years prior. They're as tough as you were going to find in the entire country. They might not be as absolutely incredible on the outsides, losing a guy like Evan Stewart, Decoria Moore being in and out of the lineup at certain times this year. They're a special team, and they are as physical, mentally, and they are mentally and physically tough as any team in the entire country. They got Dante Moore was terrible for 58 minutes of this game, and then he flips a switch. Just like Fernando Mendoza has 47 of his 112 passing yards on the final drive. Throws an absolute beautiful ball to Malik Benson that sets up the game-winning field goal by Atticus Sappington. Maybe the best name in college football, but when you have guys like Noah Whittington, Jordan Davison, and D.R. Hill, you're going to be able to do special things. Now, there's going to be tougher run defenses. There's going to be bigger teams. There's going to be bigger challenges for Oregon down the road. It doesn't change that. That's a very, very tough group to run against, and you found a way to do it. And it's a very tough group to stop the run against. Iowa wasn't able to run the football. That's a very good offensive line, one of the very best in the country, and Oregon kind of controlled that game from start to finish. Now, Iowa's going to be a tough out for everyone they play coming up. I think they have a huge one here in a second against USC, actually. This weekend, they have a massive one against USC that could be huge for the Trojans, could knock them out, a CFP race, and we'll talk about them a little bit later, but it's a very, very two tough teams that walked in there. Oregon just out-Iowa, which sounds crazy to say, but it is the truth. I think there's a reason to be worried about Oregon going forward. I think there's reasons to think they might not quite be where they need to be. That being said, you got Minnesota, USC, and Washington to finish. Go 2-1. If you go 2-1, you're in really great shape. If you go 3-1, you're probably still missing the Big Ten championship, depending on what happens around you, but you're still in a really, really good position. I think winning out is firmly on the table for this football team. I think if they go 2-1, they're going to be really, really hard to keep out of the CFP. Texas Tech rolled, and I kind of wish I did a show because I got to tell you, I would have told you that Texas Tech was going to roll in this football game, but I won't take credit for that take at this moment. But I really like this BYU team. I think they're a good team. I think they're incredibly well coached. Bear Bachmeier has played much better football than I thought he was capable of in his freshman year at the very least. You ran into a team that's just a little bit different. And that's something I've said a number of times about this Texas Tech football team. On the lines of scrimmage, they are not a normal Big 12 team. That's just the way it is. And they've done a lot to make sure that's the case. They've invested a lot to make sure that's the case. And for some reason, people act like it's a mortal sin. But at the end of the day, this team is incredible. And the crazy thing about this Texas Tech football team is we talk about Jacob Rodriguez a lot. He's an incredible player. I would have no problem if he found his way to New York City. If you compare this season to Manti Te'o's season in 2013, I believe, he's playing better football. As crazy as that sounds, he is uniquely important to that group because I don't think guys like David Bailey, I don't think guys on the line of scrimmage like Romello Height or Lee Hunter are as special as they are if the quarterback isn't only worried about number 10, because number 10 is the most important player on that defense by a relatively wide margin at this very moment. So that is something to watch as we head forward. We'll see I don't think he's going to find his way to New York City just because I think we all know how the Heisman works at this point, but at the end of the day, that is a uniquely talented player among a lot of uniquely talented players, and that's kind of what I want to zero in on here for a second. A lot of people will tell you, and a lot of people will try to do this moving forward. They'll tell you that anyone can do what Texas Tech is doing right now. They'll tell you that invest enough money, have a good coach, you'll be in great shape. You'll be able to make a run at your conference. You'll be able to win a couple of games in the CFP and maybe even win a national title. That's not the case. It's just not. I promise you. There's a lot of teams that have invested a lot of money on a lot of players, and it has not worked out because you didn't get those players. You didn't have this program. You didn't have the right guys. You didn't have Jacob Rodriguez. You didn't have Baron Morton. You didn't have certain guys that give your program a foundation. Give your program something to build off of. Texas Tech did. So yes, Texas Tech spent a lot of money this year, and it's not a bad thing. It's just the reality. They spent a lot of money going into this season to make this team a national title contender. It seems like they, at the very least, they've made the best team in the Big 12. I can promise you that. Not everyone can do this, and teams will fail going forward trying to do this because this is a special group of kids. This is a special group of people that came in. Guys like David Bailey came in. They don't have any problem playing the way that Texas Tech needs them to play. They don't need to be the biggest thing in the world now. David Bailey does a plenty good job of making him the biggest thing in the world regardless, but at the end of the day, Cole Wisniewski, huge player that came from North Dakota State, one of the better safeties in the Big 12, and we don't really talk about him all that much. They've done such a good job. Lee Hunter, an incredible defensive tackle that they brought in that's been huge every single game. You probably don't hear him too much when we're talking about this football team. It's the team. It's not the individual players. It's not the amount of money they spent. It's not any of the recruiting stuff that happened in the offseason. It's the fact that all of them, when they walked through that door, they left whatever ego they had at the door. They left whatever want they had, whatever thing that they wanted to get right about this season personally. They left that at the door because they knew this team could be special. And that's not going to work for everyone. There's going to be a couple of teams that invest a crazy amount of money on a team, and it looks like a really, really good team on paper. It looks physical. It looks fast. It looks SEC and Big Ten built. And they won't do what Texas Tech is doing because there is a mental aspect to this game that Texas Tech is ahead of everyone on as well. It's hard to describe, and it's a reason I was a little bit hesitant about this Texas Tech team coming into the year. They've put it all together. A ton of respect to Joey McGuire for taking all these pieces that it could have gone bad, and it could have gone bad in a hurry. There's a lot of places that have suffered from that. Joey McGuire got these guys ready to roll. They have bought in entirely to what this program is about. Guys like Jacob Rodriguez and Bear Morton have been massive in terms of leadership, and they got the best football team in their conference. They have a football team that I think can compete in the CFP. We'll see how that develops over the next little bit. One little worry, you have established yourself as the best team in the Big 12, Texas Tech, so congratulations for that. The downside of that is we get to get nitpicky now. We get to get a little bit more specific. You don't just get to win a game by 22 points and we skip off into the distance and have a good day. You settle for field goals 5 times in the red zone. That's a problem. If you can't get that fixed, and Bear Morton will get more healthy, everything will start to work out a little bit cleaner as you get deeper into the season. You can't settle for field goals against a team like Ohio State down the road, against a team like Georgia, or against Alabama, whoever you play down the road, Texas A&M. You can't do that 5 times in a row and expect to win a game. So that's something to watch as we move forward. As we get back to the Big 12, ton of respect to Texas Tech. Just wanted to get that rant out there. A lot of people will try to do this Texas Tech model. It will not work for everyone because they're not Texas Tech. But beside the point, the Big 12 might have a problem here. And it's not to say that they can't get 2 teams in or it's impossible. Let's say Cincinnati beats BYU in a couple of weeks, knocks them out of the Big 12 championship, and rolls into the Big 12. Well, really, whatever happens in that game, whether it's BYU or Cincinnati, that joins Texas Tech in Arlington. If Texas Tech rolls in that game again, if they win by 22, if they win by 28, if they win by 20, whatever that looks like, I'm not sure how you can argue for the Big 12 to have 2 teams. Now, maybe a Utah team gets in close, but here's the reality. If a team continues to prove that they are 20 or more points better than everyone else in your conference, how can I confidently say that the next best team in your conference is at least a top 12 team or probably a top 10 team when you really look at the way the bracket's shaking out? I think Texas Tech being this good might actually keep the Big 12 from having 2 teams in the playoff. I know that sounds a little bit crazy. I think if Texas Tech wins out the way that I expect them to win out, it's going to be tough. That BYU-Cincinnati game will likely decide who Texas Tech gets in Arlington at the end of the year. Tech gets UCF before a bye, and then West Virginia and BYU to finish. West Virginia to finish. And then you got BYU gets TCU, Cincinnati, and UCF. It comes down to that BYU-Cincinnati game. And I think in that Big 12 championship, if they get rolled by Texas Tech, it could just be the Red Raiders and everyone else sitting at home from the Big 12. Alabama escapes 20-9 over LSU. This was a lot like the Indiana-Penn State game. It's an uber-talented LSU roster with a lot of guys that can be difference makers and will be difference makers in the future for LSU, maybe for some other schools in the NFL, what have you. But I think this is just one of those games that you just have to survive. Alabama did not play great football, and particularly their offensive line, which is a problem that they're going to have. Ty Simpson's a really good football player. I would put him probably I fight with him and Julian Sain and Fernando Mendoza, mainly him and Julian Sain, but at the end of the day, he's a really, really good football player. He's been absolutely incredible. This was probably his worst game since Florida State, but he was pretty darn good in this football game. And guys just aren't helping him around him. This run game is ridiculous, and it's one that is not going to get fixed this year. I was going to say I don't think is going to get fixed. It's not. You're way too deep in the year to find a run game this late. It's going to be a really, really tough season in terms of running the football. The protection isn't all that great. It's a little bit better. They're a little bit better in that than run blocking, but there's some things they got to figure out because it can't just be can Ty Simpson run around and then make a great play with his arm, because there's going to be moments where he misses those. He missed a couple on Saturday, so it's a good team. It's a great team in a lot of respects. I think they can win the national title. You got to give the guy some help. Unless he's going to go on a Joe Burrow-type run, which I do not expect him to, you're going to have to find a way to help him out. The run game doesn't have to be great. If he can be passable at the very least, I think they're in good shape. They get Oklahoma next week. That defense is going to be a nightmare for this offensive line. He's got to be perfect, and it's going to be a weird fight that I think Oklahoma can very well win. Now, they win that one, I think they're in really good shape moving forward. They lose that one, it could go from them getting a bye in the CFP and being an SEC champion, or at least being in Atlanta, to not being in Atlanta and possibly making a road trip for the first game of the CFP. They got to make sure they're ready, and I think they're going to be fine. I worry about this offensive line quite a bit, especially with Brent Venables coming into town, but we'll talk about that one more on Wednesday and give you a full pick for that one. And then we won't waste too much time here. Texas A&M wins 38-17. I'd love to talk about this game. I like both these teams. I think they're both really fun, awesome teams. Matt Zollers was not ready for this moment. I think that can be said pretty confidently. A&M just kind of handled business. I really don't know what more there is to say. Matt Zollers goes 7 for 22, 77 yards passing. A&M's the best team in the conference, the best team in the SEC. There's no doubt in my mind, really. And I'll come out with my top 25 tomorrow, maybe Wednesday. We'll decide on that here pretty soon. But A&M's probably going to be my number 2 team in the country. Marcel Reed has getting more and more comfortable, showing more poise in the pocket, not bailing as quickly as he used to. The run game is as good as you're going to find in the country. It's not always perfect. They're going to lean on you enough to where in the third and fourth quarter you're going to have a tough time keeping up with that group. And they're faster than probably any team in the country. I bet they have more sub 4.4 guys than anyone in the entire country. It's ridiculous what they can do with just a little bit of space. There are nitpicky things about A&M that I can get into. The run defense is something that is definitely worrisome. I don't think they'll get tested too much before the end of the season on that, but at the end of the day, that is something to watch. You're probably going to get got by Jamal Roberts and Ahmad Hardy. That's just probably going to happen to every team that plays Missouri, so not necessarily the worst thing in the world. I think A&M is going to be in your SEC title. I think they very well could be in the national title. Some big-time hurdles, but you should walk into Austin 11-0 on Black Friday, and then that one will be downright special. I can tell you that. But some huge games this past weekend. 5 games that I think are going to define just what the top looks like as we move forward. Obviously, Indiana surviving changes a little bit of the dichotomy in that conference. Oregon escapes because that could have gotten really messy for the Ducks in a hurry, and still very well could. We'll talk about it all as it unfolds, but some huge games this weekend and some massive wins for some teams. But let's take a break here. When we come back, we got upset alerts. Wake Forest goes down, Louisville goes down, Duke goes down. The ACC goes down in a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the big games from this past weekend. Indiana survives on a ridiculous play from Omar Cooper, as does Oregon. Texas Tech dominates BYU in a big-time statement and maybe hurting the Big 12 and the CFP hopes. We get Texas A&M and Alabama getting big-time wins to stay atop the SEC. And now it's time to talk about some upsets, because the ACC got turned on its head. Last week, we felt like we had an idea of how everything was kind of going to work out. We had, obviously, undefeated Virginia on the top of the conference, undefeated in conference, of course. They're sitting at the top. Georgia Tech is right there. They felt like they were going to figure it out over the next couple of weeks. Well, Georgia Tech's back at the top. They're back to being the number 1 team in this conference. They are back to controlling their destiny for the ACC, partly in part due to Wake Forest getting a big-time win, 16-9 over Virginia. This was sort of unfortunate, and it's not necessarily to say that, Virginia deserved to win this game, or if Chandler Morris stayed in the game, they absolutely would have won, because they had chances to win this football game. There's no doubt about that. But Chandler Morris goes down. Felt like the air was kind of taken out of the building just a little bit. Now, they made a big play right after. And overall, I think Daniel Kalen did a nice job running this offense. You missed Chandler. There's no doubt about that. You missed the passing ability that you have with him. Missed a lot of just the comfort that a lot of those guys have with him. And it was tough sledding for the vast majority of the night. Even when Chandler Morris was in there, it was tough. But once he left, you felt like this one was, I don't want to say done, but the offense, at the very least, felt like it wasn't going to be a huge piece of this win for Virginia. It ended up being a piece of a loss. But beyond that, this was coming. I think it's the same feeling that I had going into that NC State game for Georgia Tech, where you're thinking, this team has played good enough football to win. And it's not necessarily to downplay them or downplay getting wins, because that's what matters. But at the end of the day, it felt like this was coming. Virginia was really playing with fire over the last couple of weeks. They had gotten away with a couple. They'd made a couple of really close wins look a lot better than they were. And this one finally got them. Wake Forest is a really tough team. And the job that Jake Dickert is doing, by the way, deserves a ton more respect. The job he is doing over there has been absolutely incredible. He should be in the mix for some of these big jobs. I tend to believe he won't, because he's the Wake Forest head coach, but people don't really think this thing through. So Jake Dickert should be. He probably won't be for really goofy reasons. But at the end of the day, they get Duke this upcoming weekend. you got to win. If you lose, Duke somehow still has one loss in conference. We'll get to them in a second. They could totally mess up the ACC's world, but that's going to be a huge one. You get that win, you're right back on track. You get that win, then you're probably playing the winner of Georgia Tech Pitt, if I'm not mistaken, in the ACC championship. We'll see how all of that plays out. I am far from saying that the ACC is done because it's gotten a little bit weird here late. But at the end of the day, Georgia Tech back in the driver's seat. Virginia falls, and right before him, Louisville fell, or maybe right after him. Can't remember. It was a lot of stuff going on at this very moment. But Louisville falls in overtime to Cal 29-26. Just a little bit of chaos. It dropped into the ACC, a little bit more of chaos that was dropped into the ACC. It's something that was going to happen to one or two teams this year. And not necessarily just one or two teams, but in the sense of teams that needed to win a game or were in the CFP conversation, were in the ACC title conversation. Someone was going to run into Jierren Kiave-Sagapulotele on the wrong day. That is a very talented kid. That guy has as much arm talent as just about any quarterback in the entire country. There was going to be a moment where he had no INTs, where he just ripped the ball around the field. Everything was where it needed to be. He was super confident, and he got one of those days. He had 3 touchdowns. He had no INTs. He had nearly 300 yards. It's a special player. It's a really, really special talent, and you'll find with those guys, it's not going to be perfect all the way throughout the year, especially in their freshman year. There's going to be a couple of teams per year that JKS, when he steps on the field, is just feeling a different type of way, and he's ready to roll, and he's going to tear those teams to pieces. That's just the truth. Now, Louisville losing Isaac Brown for this game was massive. K1 Brown did a great job in his stead, went over 100 yards. Just felt like they were missing that explosivity at the running back position that they kind of relied on with Isaac Brown. We'll see how they move forward. They get Clemson, then SMU to finish off their schedule. We'll see. It's a very, very interesting thing where they can absolutely beat Clemson, or at least finish off their ACC schedule. Clemson and SMU, then they obviously get the game against Kentucky at the end of the year, but they could lose to Clemson. They could lose to SMU. They could beat both those teams. I still think they would need a little bit of help in front of them, but there's a door open. There's no doubt about that. It's not necessarily fully knocking them out, but it's one you probably needed. At the end of the day, it's one they're almost definitely going to look back on and think, if we had just won that game, we're sitting in Charlotte right now with a chance to go to the CFP. But at the end of the day, they move forward. We'll talk about it a little bit more deeply on Wednesday and definitely deeply on Friday. It's going to be really, really weird. I think this weekend totally buried the ACC as a 2-bid league. I really don't see a way, unless Georgia Tech were to beat Georgia maybe and then lose to Louisville, or maybe Miami gets back into the mix and wins the title. I really don't see another way, and that's a big-time problem for this conference. Now that we've talked about them being a 1-bid league, let's just talk about them being a 0-bid league, why don't we? Because Duke loses to UConn 37-34. They fall to 5-4 on the season. Here's the problem. They're 4-1 in the ACC. I genuinely think Manny Diaz is doing some type of thought experiment, because they've lost 3 out-of-conference games to Illinois, to Tulane, and to UConn. Not bad opponents necessarily. Not necessarily to say Duke is just totally terrible out of conference. But there's no way, right? There's no way they win out, go to the ACC championship, win it, and go in as a 9-4 team into the CFP. And let's just say they do. Let's just say they don't for a second. They're a 9-4 team. They're sitting at 24th or 23rd in the country after beating Georgia Tech, let's say in the ACC championship. What happens if a team like USF is sitting at 23 and then a team like JMU is sitting at 24? The ACC would be left out of the CFP altogether. The ACC would not be a part of the CFP. And we will get into this, I promise, on Friday. We'll get into more details because it's not as crazy as it might sound. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Duke's going to slip up. They're too flawed of a team, in my opinion, to not slip up before then. But I don't know. It's something to watch. On the other side, Joey Finano is by far the most under-talked about quarterback in the country. Goes for 311, 3 scores in this one. For the season, he has over 2,800 yards, 25 passing touchdowns, and no INTs. That's crazy. That is so incredibly hard to do, and people will do he plays at UConn. He doesn't play elite competition. I don't care. The ability to put the ball for 25 touchdowns and no INTs is absolutely ridiculous. There's a lot of NFL scouts that are watching this kid thinking, if I can get my hands on him, we can do some really, really special things. This was a big-time upset, no doubt about it. It also doesn't really matter. As we just talked about, Duke can win the rest of their games in the ACC. They can get a couple of things to go their way. They might not even need a couple of things to go their way. Get into the ACC championship and get in. They could also get edged out by the Sun Belt and American champion. I don't know what's going to happen. But a ton of respect to Jim Moore. What he's done at UConn has been downright special. This team is way more talented than teams like UConn have been and maybe should be in some cases, quote-unquote should be. Plays really, really hard. They are a really tough team to deal with, and I think they could compete for the CFP next year. Frankly, they could have this year if they were able to get that win over Syracuse earlier in the year, but 2 wins over ACC teams as of right now is UConn, and they get this one. Doesn't change much for Duke, but could change a lot for the ACC moving forward. Wisconsin wins. It's something I frankly thought was not going to come out of my mouth the rest of the year. Wisconsin wins 13-10 over Washington. I could have picked a million upsets. I could have picked all of the games to be upsets. This would not have been one of them. There was a lot that were absolute blowouts this weekend that I would have picked far before I would have picked this one. I don't know. The fans didn't love when they gave Luke Fickell the extension. They didn't love, or not the extension, but said that he was going to be coming back for 2026. And then he comes back and does that. And I think that's the biggest thing to talk about here. Obviously, we'll talk about the game here in a second. The big thing with Wisconsin fans, or the big thing that I've noticed, and Wisconsin fans tell me if I'm wrong, the big worry about what Luke Fickell was going to be going forward wasn't necessarily that Luke Fickell's a downright terrible head coach. I think most people believe that he's a relatively good head coach that has made a lot of missteps since he's taken that job and is now kind of digging himself out of a hole that he created. I think the biggest worry going into the end of the season and going into 2026 was he just wasn't going to have the buy-in. He wasn't going to have the players playing at their highest level because your coach might be gone any second. He wasn't going to have the donors where they needed to be because, again, your coach could be gone at any second. You might not love that coach. This was proof that he still has this program. He still has all the players. He still has the locker room. He still has everything that he needs to have to go beat a top 25 team. That's really important. And it's not to say that everything's going to turn around and flip a switch next year. It's not to say Luke Fickell and Wisconsin are going to be a dark horse for the CFP. It's just to say you can move forward now, knowing that you have the buy-in from the boosters and knowing that you have a guy that can get the buy-in from the players. And I don't think Wisconsin fans could have said that last week. So whatever this changes for the future, whether you're happy or not happy about Luke Fickell sticking around, this is proof that at the very least, the people that need to believe in this guy believe in this guy. And that's the players. And that's the most important thing about the sport, especially at the college level. The guys have to be willing to die for you. And they're willing to die for Luke Fickell, for whatever that means to you. You can take that for what you will. Now that I said all that, Wisconsin didn't play great football in this game. The defense played incredible football. I want to give a lot of respect to them because there's a lot of different moments where they could have kind of wrapped it up and just said, this offense isn't giving us anything. We're going to do our best, but it's not going to be great the rest of the season. Cooper Catalano was incredible in this game. I believe he had 16 tackles, something crazy. But at the end of the day, they had 4 players throw a pass. Their leader was Sean West, the punter. He had 24 passing yards, and that's half of their passing yards. 24 passing yards or 48 passing yards overall for this team. A hilarious game, and one that shows it's a weird sport. Who knows what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. Wisconsin played their best game. Washington looked inept from the jump. At the very least, if you're a Wisconsin fan, that guy has his players. He has that locker room, and that really matters, especially how the season has gone. It would have been very easy to lose it. He is not, and that really does matter moving forward. For Washington, you're out of the CFP, and frankly, I don't know what's going on with that group. I tend to believe Jed Fish is going to be gone at the end of the year. I tend to believe that's part of the reason they're struggling down the stretch. But at the end of the day, maybe you can ruin Oregon's fun at the end of the year. That'll be a fun one. But Washington falls out. Tough game for them. But a moment where Wisconsin can at least look forward with, I'll call it cautious optimism for the time being. It could be even lower than that. But at the end of the day, you got a win that you've been waiting on for a very long time. He proved that he has that locker room after a lot of really, really tough moments. That's a win as far as I'm concerned. Tulane gets a win on Friday night, 38-32 over Memphis. This one felt really fishy. From the start of the week, it felt a little bit weird. It felt a little bit off. And then Ryan Silverfield went on Wake Up Barstool, and I knew they were going to lose this game. All respect to Wake Up Barstool, big fan of T-Bob and the gang. But at the end of the day, they got dominated in this football game from start to finish. Jake Retzlaff goes for 300 yards, 3 scores passing. The wide receiver trio that they have, elite. One of those that very well could be on a Power 5 roster and people wouldn't bat an eye. It is a very, very good group that they have, and they're a dangerous bunch. But Missouri dropping this one puts them in a really tough spot just because it's a really loaded conference. There's so many one-loss teams. ECU's still a one-loss team. Navy's still up there. You get those 2 teams, which is a massive win. You don't get another shot at USF. You did beat them, so you will have the tiebreaker. They might not lose the rest of the way. North Texas might not lose the rest of the way. And then Tulane obviously has the tiebreaker over you, and they might not lose the rest of the way. So we'll see what happens there. That's going to be a really, really interesting race down the stretch. And Memphis isn't out of it. I tend to believe if the chaos that happens in that conference to get Memphis back into the mix, I tend to believe JMU is probably the team that you're looking at for that CFP spot. So even if Memphis finds their way back into the American race, I feel pretty confident saying that if they were to do that, enough stuff would have happened to where if JMU were to win out the rest of the way, they would still get the nod over them. All of this can be covered on Friday. All of this is a little bit convoluted, so I understand. Apologies for that, but we'll get into all of it. It's about to get really weird. There's about to be a lot of teams sitting at the top of the SEC. We'll talk about that chaos scenario because could a 10-2 Georgia miss the CFP? That's something we'll talk about on Friday. It popped in my head earlier today, and it's actually real. I'm not joking about that. But let's take a break here. When we come back, let's get into Week 11 whip around. USC gets a big-time win with a little bit of controversy mixed in there. Georgia dominates Mississippi State, one that they very badly needed. Ohio State does Ohio State things for 4 quarters against Purdue, and we'll get you updated on all the other Group of 5 teams that had some big moments this past week, and we'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all the upsets from this past weekend. You'll find a lot of them in the ACC. It's going to get weird. We'll talk about it more on Friday, but is there a world where the ACC does not make the CFP? I'd bet no. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it. But Week 11 whip around, we got a number of games we haven't talked about yet, and we just got to get to them. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and let's start with a little bit of talk about USC getting a 38-17 win over Northwestern at home. Let's talk about it here for a second. Sam Heward makes a big-time throw in this game from the punter position. Apparently, he had changed. He was number 7 going into this week. He changed it to number 80 going into this game. I don't know if Northwestern is alerted of that. I don't know how that works. Regardless, it's the same number as their punter. You can't prepare for that. There's no good way to prepare for that because Sam Heward, good quarterback, a talented kid, 4-star coming out of high school. He looks like a punter. How am I supposed to know that that's not the punter out there if I'm Northwestern and David Braun? It sounds like it was illegal. It sounds like it should have been flagged. I don't think it really impacted the game in terms of the outright outcome. It obviously impacted the momentum of that game. The other one, Jaden Maiava, making the play after he throws the pick. He runs down, knocks the ball out, gets a touchback for his team. If USC makes the CFP, that could be the play of the year for this USC team because that was a total momentum-changing play, as was this one. I'd be a little upset. If I was a Northwestern fan, I don't know if I can say, I pretty confidently can say that that didn't decide the game. Definitely one of those things that you added something to the refs table that I didn't think they thought they were going to have to worry about this year, but you're going to have to worry about quarterbacks changing their numbers right before games going forward. But USC marches on. They get a big-time win here, a huge one against Iowa at home next weekend, and then it's Oregon. We'll see what they can do. They win those 2 games, that's probably a CFP team at the end of it all. Now, if Michigan wins out and beats Ohio State, then they have 2 wins, and so does USC, and they have the win. We'll get to it all. I promise. There's so many chaos scenarios. We'll go through every single conference and we'll break down the most chaotic scenario and we'll do our best to give you an answer for it. It's going to get weird, is the best I can tell you right now, and USC could be a big time part of that. Georgia just rolls over Mississippi State. I think everyone has been waiting on Georgia to just put together a full performance. I think everyone understands this isn't the Georgia of old. They're not going to be totally dominating. They're not that much more talented than everyone else on the field. This was a complete Georgia performance, and they're still a really good football team. There's no doubt about that. They score 38 unanswered after Mississippi State kind of marches down the field on the first drive. They dominate the ground game. I think if you ask Kirby Smart what is the perfect way for this game to play out, I think he would have told you 300 yards on the ground, a dominating performance in the first half, and be able to kind of ride this thing to a victory. It's exactly what happened. Incredible. 300-plus yards on the ground for this team. The trio that they have between Chauncey Bowens, Nate Frazier, starting to find it. I think it was something that Brooks Austin was talking about where he had to find the in-between of he's a uniquely special athlete, and you want to be able to use that. You want to be able to get a little bit different, not be a quote-unquote normal runner because he has all of that physical ability. The other part of that is you don't want to overwork. You don't want to overlook for holes in the backfield and then be late. He was late early in his career. Early this season, it felt like everything was just fire at the hole that I'm designed to go to, get as much yards as we can, get quote-unquote dirty yards, as Brooks Austin calls them. He's found the middle ground. That kid is special, and he's one of those guys that you knew had all of the ability in the world. I didn't know he was like that. I'll be totally honest with you. I am a big Nate Frazier fan. Coming into the season, I thought he was going to be a top 5 running back in the entire country. I didn't know he could do what he did on that big-time run. Incredible to be able to run out that safety. Just ridiculous what that kid is capable of, and it helps when you have Gunnar Stockton that just... Gunnar Stockton isn't the best quarterback in the country as far as I'm concerned. He's not the most talented quarterback in the country. He is the calmest quarterback in the country. There is no quarterback that is more calm in what he's doing than Gunnar Stockton, nor more confident in what he's doing than Gunnar Stockton. It's incredible to watch this kid go about his business, even in the games where he doesn't play great football. In Florida, I don't think he played great football in that game. I think he would tell you that. It still looks pretty good, and there's not massive mistakes. There's a couple mistakes here and there, but in this game, there was not a thing that got this guy off kilter. There was not a thing that got this guy off timing. He was perfect. And they got Noah Thomas moving, which is a massive thing for this football team, and I think people saw the special speed that kid has. It's a performance that Georgia badly needed. There's no doubt about that. Now you invite Texas into your house at night. It's going to be incredible. Texas absolutely needs the win. Georgia might as well need it, if I'm being totally honest. With all the chaos that could happen around them, you might need it, as crazy as that sounds. It's going to be an all-out brawl. We will talk about it probably on Wednesday. Yeah, we'll do it on Wednesday. We'll make sure we get that one in on Wednesday. It's going to be a fun one in Athens. One that puts me in a very compromised position as I'm watching that game. I'll get into more of it as I get into that breakdown, but going to be a really fun one, and Georgia just looks like they're kicking it into gear at the right time. Ohio State's really impressive, and I get it. They were down 3-0 after the first quarter. I could spend my time trying to bury them for that. I could spend my time trying to convince you they're not the number one team in the country. For whatever reason, people try to do that. This team's elite. They're as good as you will find in the entire country. There are worries, and I'll get to that here in a second, but they possessed the ball for over 40 minutes in this football game. It was just one that they had to go about their business. And I don't want to say going through the motions that's gotten me in trouble in the past. If you know that story, you know. But at the end of the day, people will doubt Ohio State. People will question, they've been rolling through this schedule. Hasn't been, elite teams really at all. I think the Texas win is still very impressive, but people like to push back on that. At the end of the day, Ohio State's been impressive this year. They haven't played the world beater, and I think we all understand that. And there is a question. Can they kick it into gear the way that they're probably going to need to against an A&M or against an Alabama or maybe against Indiana in the Big Ten Championship? Here's the thing about this team. I genuinely think they can. I really don't think there's going to be this massive hill to climb when they have to kick it up a couple of notches, because we've seen the flashes. We've seen what it looks like for them to kick it up a couple notches in game, and then they just dial it right back down. They're just one of those teams that can play. I think they could have named 34-10 before the game, and that's the way they were going to play this one. I really think that's what this team is capable of. It's not to say they're going to win the national title. It's not to say they're an absolute slam dunk. There's a lot of things that can get in their way. Julian Sain could be pressured a lot more in one game going forward and make a couple of mistakes that he hasn't made before. A lot of stuff can still go wrong for this football team. There's no one playing their level of football. There's no one all that close right this second. I think A&M's kind of close. I think Indiana's kind of close. I think Ohio State's on a different level. They get UCLA next week. They get Rutgers before Michigan. If they don't win out, they probably do miss the Big Ten title. As crazy as that sounds, there's so many teams that have one loss that I don't think they would make it. If they lose that Michigan game, they can't lose that Michigan game. I'll just put it that way. There's no way they can lose that Michigan game. In football terms, they can, of course, and I will give my pick when we get to that one. But there is a minor worry that they don't know what a true fight looks like. I don't really share that same worry in a lot of respects. I think this team is elite. I think they're going to be able to kick it into gear when they need to, and I think they can name a score for the next two games and then got to win the one against Michigan. Notre Dame rolls over Navy. That's probably the exact way that you thought this one was going to go. 49-10 in the favor of the Irish. It's just hand the ball to Jeremiah Love and get out of the way. And when C.J. Carr has 3 incompletions and 3 touchdowns, that helps as well. But at the end of the day, Jeremiah Love is out of this world. And he is, by my estimation, I don't want to put an exact number on it, he's a top 5, top 7 player in the country. I don't think there's much of a doubt about that. He's ridiculous. And this team continues to prove that they are not the same team that they were the first 2 weeks. C.J. Carr continues to improve. It's going to be a really, really tough team to beat. The moment is this Saturday. They play Pitt this upcoming Saturday. If they win it, they're still in position. They're able to sleepwalk through wins over Syracuse and Stanford, get to the CFP, not much of a question. Probably not be hosting one just because I don't think the CFP committee is going to give them that much credit. But at the end of the day, you'll be in the mix and you'll be able to do what you need to do going forward in that CFP. You will be given a shot. That Pitt game could get sketchy. So we'll see what happens. I'll pick that game later in the week. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame keeps rolling on. I don't think they should be ranked as high as they are right now. I'd be lying to you if I said this wasn't one of the 12 best teams in the country and absolutely deserve to be in the playoff if they roll out the rest of the way. Vanderbilt escapes in overtime, 45-38 over Auburn. It wasn't Hugh Freeze's fault that they were losing at the very least. It was his fault that they weren't fun to watch at the very least, because Cam Coleman, it's as simple as Cam Coleman. Throw the football in Cam Coleman's direction, general direction. It does not have to be accurate. General direction, he will make a play. Just plain and simple. And unfortunately for Cam Coleman, he had a coordinator that loved RPOs, and he had a quarterback that wasn't great at throwing RPOs. It didn't work. It was really, really ugly from the start of the season. And now it works offensively, and the defense broke down. And that's part of the business. When you have a defensive coordinator that works his way up to head coach in a week, you find the defense plays a little bit worse. If the offensive coordinator did the same thing, the offense probably would have played a little bit worse. I don't know what worse looks like for the Auburn offense, but at the end of the day, it was going to happen. Auburn's defense was going to struggle just a little bit in this game, not to mention the other guy on the other side, Diego Pavia, is so impressive. Nearly 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, continues to be the heartbeat of that football team, and it can't be overstated how important that is. That dude brings an energy, a confidence to that team when they're going into overtime against an Auburn team that had scored on them at will. That defense looks into that guy's eyes and they say, we're going to get a stop, plain and simple. And it can't really be described. That's what's happening. They get Tennessee. They get Kentucky and Tennessee to finish off the season after a bye this week, I believe. That's it between them and the CFP. Again, we'll get into the chaos scenario. There is a world where they miss at 10-2, but I like to think enough will be worked out. For Auburn, I don't know, man. I have no idea. I don't know if Auburn is cursed. I don't know if it's going to totally change when the new coach comes in. What I do know is whoever that next coach is, call Cam Coleman first. Don't call your wife. Don't call anyone else. Call Cam Coleman and make sure that he is on campus. I think it's going to be really hard to do. I'll put that out there from the jump. I think it's going to be really hard to keep a lot of these guys in Auburn, whatever you do. That is the very first call that you make. Your mom will find out, I promise. Call Cam Coleman. Try to make sure that he is on that roster moving forward. For Vanderbilt, you keep rolling on. You keep rolling on. You got 2 more games between you and possible CFP. Again, we'll get into the craziness. But at the end of the day, different for Auburn, but still the same. They're just one of those teams. But at the end of the day, Vanderbilt gets a big-time win in overtime. Moving forward, we got Miami getting a big-time win over Syracuse 38-10. They get back on track. They came out flat in this one, struggled mightily in the first half, and then they just kind of figured it out. They kind of did what they needed to do the rest of the way. It wasn't all that pretty. I still have big-time worries about this football team. The run game isn't good enough, and there's a lot of reasons for it. The offensive line isn't necessarily as good at run blocking as they are at pass protection, but also when the quarterback doesn't scare anyone with his legs, it changes things. When he's not willing to pull the ball at least one time on his own read, makes things a whole lot easier for even defenses like Syracuse. So they were able to score 38 points. I'm not here to crap on the Miami offense. Just some things that are a little bit worrisome. Moving forward, it's a great team. It's a good team. It's a team that should be in the CFP conversation if they would get out of their own way, but they get NC State, then Pitt to end the year. I don't think they get out of that unscathed, if I'm being honest. I think they could, but even if they do, it might not mean anything. So it's one of those years where Miami's got to hope for people in front of them to miss, and that's not where Miami should be. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. I'll release my rankings here pretty soon, and I think I'm going to do the thing the CFP committee did and have Notre Dame over Miami, if I'm being honest. Clemson gets a win, 24-10. That has to feel really good for Clemson Tiger fans. They get in the win column. They look okay doing it. It wasn't perfect. It's probably not going to look perfect at any moment this year, but they looked okay doing it. Not a ton to say here, if I'm being totally honest, but one that they badly needed, one that probably was going to be huge in the preseason, at least a lot of people looking forward to this one. Afterthought the entirety of Saturday, as crazy as that sounds. The other part of this is Mike Norvell's time's probably up. I don't know when it's happening. Frankly, I don't know why it hasn't already happened, but that's a totally different conversation. We'll talk about that on Friday as well. We'll talk about all the coaching vacancies and what could happen there. But a big-time win for Clemson. They move forward to a game against Louisville where they could totally knock out the Cardinals from any contention. At the very least, you can wreck other people's seasons, right? So we'll see what happens with that one, but a big-time win, 24-10 over Florida State. Kentucky just took Florida to the woodshed. This is not the way that I thought this game was going to go. Even if Kentucky won, even if they won by 2 possessions, I wouldn't have picked it to go down this way. DJ Lagway throws 3 picks, gets benched for Trammell Jones, a very talented freshman on that football team. I don't know what happens with him. I'll be totally honest with you. And this coming from someone, I think going into the season, I had him ranked. Very few people will give you their rankings totally unsolicited, so appreciate this. But very few people, I had him ranked number 4 in the country coming into the season. I think this kid is uniquely talented. I think he has all the ability in the world. I also think he is injury prone. I also think he hasn't practiced enough to be in a position to really succeed at a high level. I don't know what happens with him. I don't know who's going to trot out there next week against Ole Miss. That'll be an interesting one for a lot of fans around Ole Miss. But at the end of the day, I don't know what happens going forward. With DJ Lagway for Kentucky, I think you got Mark Stoops for 2026. I feel pretty confident saying that at this very moment. But at the end of the day, for Florida, hope Jaden Ball stays. I think hope DJ Lagway stays. But at this point, I don't know. I don't know what Florida fans are thinking. I know they're thinking about Lane Kiffin, and we'll see what happens next week in Ole Miss. We'll see what happens with those rumors over the next little bit, but it's on to 2026, and now it's a little bit more murky than it was before somehow. Nebraska gets a 28-21 win over UCLA. They needed it. If they lost this one, the arrow was going to be sort of pointing up, I suppose pointing up. I think now it's pretty definitively pointing up. I get the frustration. You felt great coming into this season. You get the win over Cincinnati to start the year. You think CFP is on the table, and it was on the table. you fell a little bit short. And Dylan Raiola going down has a huge piece in that, but TJ Lateef played really good football in this game. For it being his first start, was very impressed with him. Emmett Johnson is as special as can be at running back. Frankly, I'm trying to think through it because I'm going to miss someone, but yeah, he might be my Doak Walker pick right now. I think Ahmad Hardy's up there. I think a couple other running backs are very much in that mix, but Emmett Johnson has been downright incredible for this team. 230 total yards in this game, was their leading receiver as well. A huge one at Penn State coming up. If they can get that one before the bye week, you could turn this thing into a 9-3 season and continue to move up under Matt Rule. Maybe not the season that you expected to have, but at the end of the day, very, very successful one. Another step forward for UCLA. The coaching search is underway. We'll see what happens there going forward. Still a place that I think has a lot of untapped potential. Still a place that has a lot of work to do. The group of six had a number of other big-time games. South Florida just rolls over UTSA 55-23. That is the best offense in the group of five, as far as I'm concerned. Incredible, incredible group. Byron Brown is playing the best football he's probably played in his career. Incredible what Alex Golesh is doing with that unit. Hawaii gets a big-time win, 38-6 over San Diego State. Whenever you go to the island, you're going to have a tough time. That's just the reality of playing Hawaii. That's what happened to San Diego State. Probably knocks the Mountain West out of any conversation. Now, UNLV still sort of alive, but I tend to believe we're not going to have our G5 or our CFP G5 representative from the Mountain West moving forward. James Madison, one of the teams that's very much in it, 35-23 over Marshall. Huge, huge for a wake-up Barstool. We just talked about it a little bit earlier with Ryan Silverfield. Bob Chesney came on as well, and he got a big-time win. So huge for T-Bob and the crew over there. But Southern Miss 27 over Arkansas State 21. Just a really good Southern Miss team. A team that probably more people should be watching around the country. That's a very, very fun team that's playing high-level football right now. But they get a big-time win. They move forward, and probably not in the CFP conversation, but at least still a very, very fun team that deserves a lot of respect right now. But this is a fun week. It was a weird week. It was one of those weekends where it felt a little bit sleepy early in the day, a couple of blowouts going on, nothing crazy, and then Penn State takes the lead, and you have to turn your attention there. And then the 3:30 slate kind of slows down just a little bit, and then the night slate, it felt like a million things were happening all at the same time, and we got to the end of it, and a lot of questions. I don't know what the SEC is going to look like by the end of the year. The Big Ten, the Big Ten one-loss team's an absolute mess right now. The ACC, do they have two teams that can possibly make the CFP? Does the Big 12 or even have two teams that can make the CFP with the death march that Texas Tech is on right now? Apologies, but an incredible weekend. And we got an incredible one coming up. We got a crazy, crazy weekend coming up with Texas, Georgia, with Notre Dame Pitt. We have a great one down D2 that we are going to talk about. I promise you. We're going to give some love to them as well. But we're going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday moving forward. Just feels like a better rhythm for everyone. So we're going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Wednesday we'll do a lot of the picks. Friday we'll do miscellaneous. We'll talk about coaching searches. We'll talk about where I think everyone sits in the CFP conversation. I'll give my top 25 either tomorrow or Wednesday out on all the socials, and maybe we'll go over it a little bit on here. I'll probably release a blog as well, so be on the lookout for that. But a lot more coming. A lot of short-form content coming on X, on YouTube. Might start a TikTok, as crazy as that sounds. We'll get into all of that as it unfolds. But a lot of new stuff coming as we get towards the end of the year, because I think there's going to be a lot of explainers that have to be done with the tiebreakers and with two lost teams. Who would get the benefit of the doubt over the other one? As of right now, I don't know. I'm going to do my best to get an answer for you before Friday, but on Wednesday, we'll do all the picks. We'll get into all the crazy picks for the massive Week 12 slate that we got on deck. We'll talk about it all on Wednesday. So thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the absolute world to me. Helps me out a ton. This is something that I really want to build into something special. So please do that. It means the world to me. But thank you so much for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday to break down a massive Week 12 slate.